The World Wide Web is a very big place, and if you can be bothered to look there, might as well be an article or two about you on there. Sure about my guests here. But across Europe, more and more people are asking for links to pages about them to be removed in a quest to be forgotten. Eleanor's been spending a bit of time online to find out more.
Go on, admit it. We've all done it. A quick Google of yourself just to see what's out there about you. Boring, boring and boring. But what if you don't like what you find?
Well, earlier this year, in a case involving a Spanish businessman, the European Court of Justice ruled that links to articles which were outdated or irrelevant could be removed on request, the so-called right to be forgotten.
And people who've previously fought battles to protect their own privacy are backing the court's decision.
I think the ruling was very significant because it's clearly right that something that's not relevant, is out of date, shouldn't constantly come up every time the Spaniard's name was looked for or anybody else's name. So to me it seems absolutely right.
Web links should only be removed if the impact on someone's privacy is greater than the public's right to find them. But the decision has sparked lots of arguments over censorship and freedom of speech.
Our main concern with this is the breadth and lack of definition in this ruling. So the ruling provides for individuals to request links to be removed if they are considered irrelevant or outdated, and that's a fairly broad and wide definition. And the second problem is that this decision is being made entirely by a private company with very little oversight about how they're making that decision, and no appeals process for the public or the publisher if they want to challenge a decision that might be in the public interest.
Since setting up its deletion process back in May, Google has had more than 169,000 requests to forget around 577,000 links, though it's only removed 41.7% of them. But these online pages aren't actually deleted. You can still find them by going to the same search engine, but using the version hosted outside Europe. And that's why some say the ruling is absurd.
The right to be forgotten is something of a misnomer. It's actually the right to be hidden away or made more difficult to find. And the analogy we would use is a bit like going to a librarian, for example, and saying, here is a list of books I'd like you to lock away, please. And so the librarian locks them away. So they're there, but nobody knows that they're there and nobody's able to find them.
But others claim it's the best possible solution.
You're weighing up being fair to the individual versus the public's right to know. Now somebody has to make that decision, and Google make an editorial decision on that, subject to appeal to an information commissioner. It seems to me that's about as good as it gets. You can't specify something down to the last detail because each case is different.
The Information Commissioner's Office says it is expecting a challenge as the volume and complexity of complaints increases. I'll admit, it does get a bit addictive. I'd better stop Googling myself and get on with some work.
Who said television was narcissistic? Eleanor Garnier reporting. Well, we've been joined by Nigel Shadbolt, Professor of Artificial Intelligence at the University of Southampton, who is also chairman of the Open Data Institute, which he co-founded with Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who needs no explanation, of course. Nigel Shadbolt, in your experience, what has been the impact of this ruling on the web?
Well, it's brought a debate very much to the fore, this whole issue about what should and shouldn't be available. Are we really going to rely on the difficulty of finding information to protect our privacy? Of course, the search engines are taking this very seriously. This is actually a ruling, so in the European context, Google is working hard to take down the links on request. But there's a whole set of issues surrounding this problem.
What are you most worried about?
Well, I think it confuses a lot of different ways in which information on the web might concern us. Clearly, there's defamatory material. In fact, just today, a case has been settled, David Hegland's case against Google, where a huge amount of defamatory material was simply being put on the web. Effectively, he was a subject of extensive trolling. And you would expect, I think, search engines to act responsibly in this case, and Google appears to be. And in fact, of course, the real problem there is redress, accountability. We need to be able to go to the perpetrators of defamation and tackle them. But in other cases, it's data that's stale or out of date. Obviously, we'd like correct data to be retrieved, but search engines aren't all seeing in this respect. Sometimes the data is personal information that's leaked out of there, disclosures that were never intended, famously planning applications that have your mobile telephone number that get scanned in, you never sought to disclose it, but it's out there on the web. Again, there are services starting to emerge where this can be put right. The issue about forgetting is really a misnomer. It's about taking care of different kinds of information in the information space.
Because it isn't fair, is it, if there is a negative story or a negative article about an individual that, as you say, is outdated or hasn't actually been updated to give a clear result at the end of something, that person's reputation will be tarnished if that's the thing that comes up top when you do a Google search on them.
That's right, and I think, again, issues of redress of that sort are perfectly proper thing to consider. I think what we've got to also imagine is how this world is going to evolve. As we make laws are easy to make and often hard to repeal, and often the technology is moving on apace. And I think what I would call for here is much more research by internet companies, by those who understand how the web's evolving, to think how we can actually build into the contents itself where it came from, its provenance, forms of redress, forms of counterclaims, so you just don't get the mendacious or the false information at the top of the search.
Nigel Shadbolt, thank you very much. Do individuals have a right to be forgotten, or at least have that information about them pushed further down the agenda?
Up to a point. I mean, I think when the printing press first came to Europe, the elites tried to use the new technology and restrict it and use it to prevent knowledge flowing freely. They're trying to do the same thing again. It's futile. The internet means that information is going to flow. This attempt to restrict it is futile. And ultimately, I don't think it's desirable.
Right. Well, that's the question. Is it desirable? It may be futile for the reasons that we've heard, but is it desirable? Should there be some control, as the ruling said, exerted by either the private companies, by the search engines, or by the state, if you like?
If there's something there which is not true, there's something that is defamatory, something that within a court of law would be felt as being not appropriate to be in there, then I think you have to have means of controlling it. Other than that, just because we don't like it, you know, that's the price you pay for free speech.
Right, but is there a balance between the rights of individuals, as always in these issues, and the public interest?
Well, I think the public interest is very much in favour of people being able to retrieve legitimate information about other people. It may be inconvenient, but I think the idea that we can control that is cuckoo. On the other hand, I also agree that if somebody has been defamed and what is actually out on the internet is untrue about them and has been shown to be untrue, then it may only be a palliative because that information may still remain available, but there is a duty on the ISP to deal with it. And I think if one has that dividing line, it's probably the best place to be.
Right, but so the ruling then is a nonsense, and is it also a nonsense because it only applies to the EU, and you can't actually geographically limit these?
Absolutely. We saw a similar thing when printing press technology came along. It's futile simply because, as was pointed out, the information is still available on the web. It can be accessed and found elsewhere. What the European elites have discovered is that they can't control digital information. And, you know, that's great news for the rest of us. It's bad news for them.
Right, but it does show, Gisela, that actually search engines are taking this seriously. They are actually going to carry out these requests, you know, even if there are a lot of them to deal with.
Well, this is where I have a problem with it, because I think that if there are things which are in the public interest and are not within the legal framework, then that is the function of the state. I don't think it is the function of the private company. I'm uncomfortable that it's left to Google to decide.
I mean, why should private companies have the right to decide what is legitimate and what isn't?
Indeed. Maybe what we need to do is change our expectations as to what is and what isn't going to appear about us. I mean, we live in a world, after the printing press came along, lots of things were written that shocked lots of people. We just maybe need to adjust our social expectations.
Right, well, Nigel Shadbolt, if you're still there in Southampton, or I don't know, maybe he's gone by now. No, he's there. I mean, in your view, would you be more comfortable with the state making decisions about what can and can't be kept on people rather than a private company?
No, and I think what we're seeing,
the courts.
What we're seeing with the Google situation is they're trying at this moment to kind of come up with some kind of independent, some board of scrutiny, but it's very imperfect at this point in the sense that it's a very blunt form you have to fill in to actually request a link to be taken down. So we need to do a lot more if we're going to go down this route of effectively taking down defamatory material, giving people some recourse. But I agree, I think the notion that somehow you can put things right by an act of practical obscurity, by simply hiding things, making things harder to find, that can't be the way to move forward. We need a much more balanced and nuanced way in which we provide guarantees and regulations in this new space.
Nigel Shadbolt in Southampton, thank you very much.